Good afternoon and welcome to the June 28th Park Advisory Committee of the East Bay Regional Park District. Chair Rickard, shall I take roll call?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
And ask that people state their name, appointing authority, and hometown as you call their name as well.
Okay, thank you. Also, today on the call is Board Member Ann Wieskamp. Vice Chair Obringer.
I am here and I am representing the Contra Costa Mayor's Conference, and I serve on the Concord City Council.
Thank you. Member Arce is absent today. Member Best.
Yes, Linda Best. I live in Alamo and I'm appointed by Director Lane.
Thank you. Member Burke is also absent today, I believe. Member Carey.
I am Andrew Carey. I live in Newark and I'm appointed by Ann Wieskamp.
Okay. And Member Chang, I have not seen him yet. Member Claxton.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Susie Claxton from Fremont and here at the request of Director Dennis Wasby.
Thank you. Member Corkin.
Hello, I am appointed by the Alameda Labor Council. I live in Oakland.
Thank you. Member DeChambeau, is she present? I don't believe she's here. Member Gregory?
Yeah, I'm in San Leandro, appointed by Ellen Corbett.
Thank you. Member Ho?
Hi, I'm Adela Ho. I live in West Contra Costa County and appointed by Director Eccles.
Thank you. Member Lacey? I'm not sure she's on this call. Okay. Member Mahadevan?
Hi, Dev Mahadevan, live in Castro Valley, appointed by Dennis Wasby.
Thank you. Member Nason?
Hi, I'm appointed by the Alameda County Mayor's Conference, and I'm a resident of Albany, where I serve on the City Council.
Thank you. Member Dieter, did I skip you by mistake?
Yes, you did.
Sorry.
That's okay, I'm here. I live in Alameda and I was appointed by Director Corbett.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Member Robinson.
I'm Elisa Robinson. I live in Pittsburgh and I'm appointed by Director Coffey.
Thank you. Member San Juan.
Hi, Olivia San Wong. I live in Pleasanton and I was appointed by Director Ann Wieskamp.
Thank you. Member Skardoff.
Hi, I live in Martinez and I'm representing the Contra Costa Special Districts Association.
Thank you. Member Williams.
Hi, Roland Williams. I'm representing Alameda County Special Districts and I live in Castro Valley.
Thank you. Did I miss anybody that has entered or? Okay, I think that's it then. Thank you.
And me, and I'm appointed by Director Rosario, and I live in Oakland. But thank you very much.
Also present today is Eric Feeler, Chief of Government and Legislative Affairs, Jim O'Connor, AGM of Operations, Deborah Acker, CFO of Finance, AGM of Management Services, Jeff Rasmussen, Assistant Finance Officer, Michelle Strawson-O'Hara, Assistant Finance Officer, Katie Hornbeck, Grants Manager, Yolanda Burial-Knight. Let's see if I've missed anybody else. I believe Lance Breed is here.
And Alan Love, I believe.
Alan Love is on the call. And
Dave Mason.
There you are. And Dave Mason, also from Public Affairs. Thank you.
I think Juliana's here too.
Is she on? Okay, great. And Juliana Shermer from the foundation.
Great. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Today's meeting is held in accordance with the Governor's executive order allowing for members to participate in standing committee meetings remotely. We're also providing live audio streaming and have provided the public the opportunity to email or call in prior to the meeting for public comment. This information can be found on the agenda on the district website, ebparks.org. Do any committee members have any questions about the procedures before we move ahead? Seeing none, The first agenda item is approval of the minutes of the May 24th, 2021 meeting. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes?
Chair, I did have one comment. And maybe I've never saw this, but I noticed that when we call roll, we don't actually say when the meeting is called to order. We say when we adjourn. Just a
Maybe you're
like,
never in order.
That's a good point. We will make note of that.
otherwise I would approve adoption of the minutes.
I will second.
Any further discussion? We have a motion for approval by Roland, a second by Linda Best. Would you please, Madam Secretary, call the roll?
Well, thank you, Chair Rickard. Vice Chair Obringer,
Yes.
Member Best,
Yes.
Member Carey,
Yes.
Member Claxton,
Yes.
Member Corkin,
Yes.
Member Dieter,
Yes.
Member Gregory,
I'm going to vote no because I was not part of the minutes.
Member Ho,
Yes.
Member Mahadevan,
Yes.
Member Nason,
Yes.
Member Robinson,
Yes.
Member San Juan,
Yes.
Member Skardoff,
Yes.
and Member Williams,
Yes.
and Member Rickard, Chair Rickard.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. At this point, we'll move on to our next item, which is comments from the board member from Ward 5, Ann Wieskamp. We welcome you and look forward to your comments.
Thank you so much. Let me tell you, it's a pleasure to see some of you after a very long time and to see some of you who I've never met before. So Zoom is a whole different world for all of us, but I guess we're getting used to it. Dave Mason is helping with this, and thank you so much, Dave. One of the most exciting things that's happened recently is actually getting out to a park in a group, and the park that is, you're going to see, is Del Val, and we actually opened a visitor center. You're going to see a few pictures, maybe a little short video about it. But let me tell you, it is such a pleasure to see what was a very small, underutilized area turned into a much larger visitor center, and one that I think you'll find very interesting. We had a group of us, including our new general manager, 2 other board members, and a member of the Livermore City Council and of Zone 7, Olivia, who you know pretty well. And we got together, and the only bad point was, I hate to say it, but there were mosquitoes. But they should be gone by now, they assure me. So it'll be a great place for you to visit. We have to thank Regional Parks Foundation for funding, and Steve Glazer and former Assemblywoman Catherine Baker, who helped us get funding from the state so we could redo this. It's going to be very much appreciated by all the visitors who come to Del Val. So I hope you'll make it out. And the hours are running 7:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. on the weekends when a naturalist will be there. So let's have a look at the video. Here we are at the ribbon cutting. I'm not sure quite what's happening. There's Ashley, who's our supervising naturalist. Group of very happy people. And actually going inside, getting a preview of all the wonderful exhibits. I hope you'll get a chance to go out there. I was really impressed with them. People worked, probably over a dozen people worked all year getting this exhibit together. And that was by Zoom, of course.
A surprising amount of water in the lake.
Well, not as much as we'd like, but there's enough that we can allow swimming. How many of you been to Del Valle? That'll be an interesting question. It's a long way out there. Getting a look at some of the inside, and that is a Livermore City Council member and her 2 children who were there trying out the exhibit and having a good time with it. That's Brittany Kick. She too was trying out the exhibit. Let me tell you, adults enjoy it just as much as kids do. They fight for the opportunity to get in there. They learn a lot about the importance of water and how Del Valle is important to Alameda County. So hopefully you'll get a chance to try it for yourself. Now we're on to the Del Valle water system. Del Valle is like a city in itself. And if this system was the way it was just a short time ago, people had to bring in drinking water. It's in the middle of nowhere, literally. And so we, luckily, with a lot of work on a lot of people's part, I got funding from the state, and we could redo the water system totally. The pipes, the plant, and here's the map. You can see what they were engaged in doing. And we'll see actual pictures of the whole reclamation of the water system. It took a long time, but it was well worth it. And again, the state helped a great deal with this $7.5 million project. Steve Glazer, Rebecca Bauer-Kaihan, and former Assemblywoman Catherine Baker all worked hard to get this money for us. And without it, we really couldn't function. And now we're moving on to another one of my favorite projects, Dumbarton Quarry Campground on the bay. You'll see the original, the deepest spot in the United States at one time when they had finished digging. And then when it was partially full of water, and we had thoughts of having a lake there, that did not pan out. You couldn't keep fish alive in it, so we rethought what we were going to do. And we started filling it up again. Isn't it interesting how you can have a business that makes money taking it out, putting it back in, and you end up with, we get a tipping fee on all of this that helps pay for things at Coyote Hills. And there you are at Dumbarton Quarry Campground on the bay. Many trees that have some room to grow, but they're going to be a nice amenity for all those campsites. And you'll notice these are state-of-the-art campsites. Wi-Fi is there. An amphitheater, campground with showers, with a little store. It's just, it's taken a long time to get here, but hopefully all of you will be at the grand opening. And I have been promised that we will have a dedicated ceremony on August 28th. I'm holding staff to that. The Lily May, who is the mayor of Fremont, promised she would be there. I suspect Al Nagy as mayor of Newark will be there too. Then we're on to Ardenwood interpretive programs. You no longer have to register. They're masked when people are close with each other. And the trains rides resume on August 1st. And my appointee from Newark is going to be happy about that. I know he's very involved with the train. Berry picking. How many of you have been picking blackberries? I've only done it in Oregon. It's kind of a sticky mess, but it's wonderful. And Ardenwood is one of my favorite parks, especially on a Sunday afternoon. It's just a great place for families. So, again, state budget, $9 million to embrace and reimburse us for the OHV for the Tesla property. I've been long interested in saving Tesla. It is an incredible area. And on July 8th, Assemblymember Rebecca Bauer-Cajon's bill to protect Tesla is going to be on the Senate Natural Resources and Water District. I'm hoping to testify if possible, but let's all watch that with bated breath. I had the opportunity to be at the Tesla property, and it's just simply an incredible piece that should be hopefully a state park and that we'd have some access to for tours. So with that, we are done. I hope you have gotten interested in visiting some of these parks soon. And if there are any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. I think Ward 5 has just some incredible parks.
Thank you, Ann. Are there questions for Director Wieskamp?
Again, take the opportunity, if possible, to come out to Del Val, not on the 4th of July, please. Be really busy at that time, but they're all interesting, and I've enjoyed the chance to see you all again.
Great.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Yeah, where is the Tesla property?
The Tesla is next, it is out next to the OHV park that exists now. And if you get a chance to look at it, you'll see what can happen to land if you are having a lot of motor vehicles on it. Tesla's unique in that it sort of serves as the point of connection between us and the Central Valley. When it comes to habitat, it's very important. Both, it's just that connection point that's very important. Without it, I think we'd be in real trouble for a lot of our critters.
Okay, thank you.
It's not available to the public. If there's ever a tour and you get a chance, I hope you'll be able to go there.
Rochelle?
That I was going to ask about that, about public access. If it is acquired, will it become an area where
it wouldn't be open, but I would hope that we could do tours. There is a place of a virtually unknown tribe on the site. It's quite ancient. And also, of course, the coal mines and so on. But let's hope that there would be some access in the future. But the most important thing right now is preservation. And I think it would be great if we could give the money back to the OHP. They could go over somewhere else that's not so important and precious.
Great.
So let's hope.
Okay, Roland?
Thank you, Anne, for that presentation. I had a question. Firstly, I wanted to follow up. You said the dedication was on 8/28, or?
Yes.
Okay.
That has been promised faithfully by Jim. I have given him a bad time for years. I'm sorry. Everybody's done their best, and it's just staff has done a great job on it.
So my question is, kind of looking at that view, is it set up where you can tent camp there, or is it more kind of drive-in?
It's drive-in, but I was assured if somebody comes in there and wants to rent a site and camp on it with a tent, they could do it. We're going to be very open-minded here. But I think mostly it will be for people coming in their vehicles. The mayor of Newark is quite excited because he has a place there where people rent RVs. And evidently the rules are that you have to go park somewhere for 24 hours before you can hit the open road. He's been out several times when we had sort of overlooks of the site, and he thinks they're going to be very appreciative of this location.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's not on the agenda, but I believe that Juliana has an update on the foundation. Is that right, Juliana?
Great.
This is always one of my favorite meetings each month. So I don't have a huge update, but I just wanted to come say hello and kind of fill you in on some of the things we're doing and what I know. The last time I spoke, I think I had mentioned that our campership appeal, which is our spring fundraiser, had just dropped and we didn't have any results yet, but I'm pleased to say that we are now trending better than last year. So year over year, we are seeing an increase. I don't have the total tally, but I think that's remarkable coming out of 2020 and into 2021 to see the level of support from individuals in our community and still wanting to support the virtual programming, as well as hoping that we can get kids and folks back directly into the parks. So that's some good news. Membership continues to go very well. We're seeing a lot of sales at the kiosks themselves. So people are purchasing them when they're coming to the parks. We're still seeing about a 20 to 25% increase in new members. And again, that kind of sustains us because with our revenue, we did extend membership for 3 months in 2020. So those who had planned on renewing about this time won't be renewing until later in the year. So all the new members that we're getting will help us keep our revenue up. And then hopefully we'll still have strong renewals. So we're feeling very positive about that. And then I believe I had shared with you last we spoke that it was our corporations and foundations where we were really struggling. And I think that's really due to a lot of them struggling as well, trying to get their employees back to work, trying to transition back into in-person working, not quite sure what their revenue is going to look like. But I'm pleased to say we're into June, we're halfway through the year, and I've just now started some conversations with some of our longtime funders, and I'm seeing a lot of progress. So I can't say I have any wins, but I can tell you we have a couple big asks out there right now, and I'm feeling pretty good that hopefully we can secure those before the end of the year. So those are my happy updates. I think everything is going really well with us. We still get a lot of comments and compliments from people out there, just super grateful and thankful that the parks are open and the role that we've played during this pandemic. So thank you to all of you for your time and helping us keep this engine running. So
great. Thank you, Juliana. Any questions for Juliana? Nope. Well, we'll look forward to more good news in the future.
Oh, wait, quick. I had a quick question, Rick. Sorry, I was muted. So segueing with the Park Foundation and the opening of the Dumbarton campsite, will there be programs for children there, like little group campouts at the Dumbarton Quarry? Is that something that's part of the campership program?
potentially, I see Jim's hand up there. I know we've gotten a request for funding for one program out there for 2022, but I'll let Jim answer.
Yeah, you may not have been out there yet, but we have a amphitheater site out there, and we do have staff at Coyote Hills, and we absolutely do plan to do programming on site at the new campground in the day use area. So that's in progress now.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's
You're
wonderful
welcome.
to hear.
Thank you. Other questions? If not, we will move along. Madam Secretary, do we have any public comments today?
We do not, but I just want to make a note that Member Chang and Member DeChambeau have just entered the meeting, but no public comments today.
Thank you. Hello, James and Linda. Great. All right. Well, we will move into our presentations. The first item is the 2020 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, which is an action item for the PAC to recommend approval to the board. And with that, I will turn it over to Deborah Ocker.
Good afternoon, PAC members. Deborah Ocker. I'm the Assistant General Manager of Finance and Management Services and the CFO for the Park District. And I'll just start by saying we met with the PAC Finance Committee. Linda Best is our chairperson for that, just before this meeting, and kind of shared some of the highlights of the report, and the members of the Finance Committee asked some questions that we'll try to make sure we highlight during our presentation. Today you get finance throughout your whole meeting, so I hope you're up for it. Have your snacks. We're very happy to present to you today. I have with me Michelle Strawson O'Hara. She's our Assistant Finance Officer. And also Director Wieskamp sat on the Finance Committee meeting on Friday, so she gets to hear this again. I'll just do some introductory remarks, and then Michelle will go ahead through the presentation. And I just want to remind you that as a government, we do follow the practices of governmental accounting and the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. That's GASB instead of FASB. And we have fund accounting. So remember, our general fund is our main operating fund of the district. And then we also have special revenue funds and other fund types that you see throughout the report. Hopefully you did get a chance to review our report. We try to summarize the giant hard copy report, and it does have a link on our website to our annual financial report, which we don't have to print as many hard copies anymore because everybody's virtual. But we did mail copies of that to the Finance Committee and the chair. So again, we have our external auditors annually come in and perform an independent audit. We use the firm Brown Armstrong. It's our second year with them. Now they've done 2 audits virtually with us, which is pretty amazing. They finished the 2020 audit, or the 2019 audit that we presented to you last year. And now this year, for the year ended December 31st, 2020 is what this annual financial report is for. And Michelle will go over the details, but we have an unmodified opinion from our auditors, which is the a clean opinion with no recommended changes. And then also as part of their audit, they do review, besides the financial part, they review the compliance with our grant programs. All the federal grants have to meet pretty rigorous compliance requirements, and they review the district's internal controls and to make sure that we meet all those. And we had no findings in that area, with grant expenditures on the federal side of over $3 million. And of course, our grant portfolio you're going to hear about later is much greater than just that portion. So with that, I will turn it over to Michelle for a pretty high level presentation, and I'll fill in some additional details as she goes through the slides. So Michelle, go right ahead.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm Michelle Strawson O'Hara, Assistant Finance Officer. Deborah, can you confirm that you can see the PowerPoint okay? Great. Okay, today we are very pleased to present our 2020 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. I'd like to start off by recognizing our finance team, and in particular, our accounting manager, Kim Belingett, who had a significant role in putting this together. And there were many other staff throughout the district who contributed to the timely completion of the financial report. As a reminder of the district's audit cycle, the interim audit kicked off in January with auditors from Brown Armstrong conducting interviews and preliminary testing and reviewing internal controls and compliance. Then at the end of April, they conducted their final fieldwork testing, which was, as Deborah mentioned, again done remotely for the second consecutive year. The testing and financial report preparation continued through mid-June when we were able to finalize the reports. In addition to our presentation today, we presented to the Finance Committee last Friday, and audit partner Rosalba Flores was on hand to discuss the independent auditor's report and to confirm that the district received a clean or unmodified audit opinion. In the introductory section of the report, you'll see the Certificate of Achievement in Financial Reporting Award from the Government Finance Officers Association, which the district has received for 20 consecutive years. We've again submitted the award for the 2020 report. The first financial statement is the statement of net position, which shows the total increase in net position to $885 million, which is primarily made up of net investment in capital assets, as the district continues to invest in land acquisitions and development. Of the total 747 million investments in capital assets, approximately 576 million of that represents land and trails, which are recorded at historical cost. You can see how the increases in the investment in assets, the blue line, is relatively consistent with total net position, the green line. This next slide is a summary of the governmental funds balance sheet, which includes the general fund, the debt service fund, project fund, and other non-major funds. The district's governmental funds have a combined fund balance of 283 million, which was a reduction of 20.8 million from 2019, primarily due to the spending down of capital bond proceeds for projects. Governmental accounting classifies these fund balances in a hierarchy, breaking down the fund balance into what's available to spend and what is not. At the top are non-spendable balances such as inventory and prepaid expenses. The next section is restricted by external parties, legal requirements, or contracts. Committed balances are where the board has passed a resolution to set aside money for special circumstances, and these funds can only be used in compliance with that resolution. Assigned funds are set aside for the specific purpose such as election costs or legal contingencies. And unassigned is what's left over for future spending. This next slide is a summary of governmental funds, statement of revenue, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. The most significant changes from 2019 were a decrease in charges for services due to the reduction in summer programming in 2020 and increases in ASD's expenses due to completion of several projects in 2020. This next slide looks at the general fund budget to actual, which shows the original approved budget, the final budget, and actual amounts for 2020. In the actual column, the net change in fund balance was 9.5 million for the year, which was attributed to higher than projected property tax revenues, as well as personnel and operating expenditures below budget.
Michelle, I'll just add a little bit of detail to this, and I apologize that it's so small, but during the subcommittee meeting, we did talk about how did we end the 2020 year and what did that look like with all of the uncertainty that was going on. And so here, when you look at the revenue section, the property taxes, although there was a lot of reports of we weren't sure how the year was going to end, the district held their budget projections and did not make any mid-year adjustments to property tax. And we did end up coming in on target. We projected about a 7% increase in our property taxes from the prior year, and that's where we ended, just 3% greater than what our budget was. The majority of that increase over budget in property tax is kind of the unsecured portion of property tax, and the redevelopment dissolution money, which are very difficult to project. Our secured property tax, we were right on target with our budget. Another area that had greater than expected results on the revenue side was our interest earnings. And at year end, the market was very high. And so we had over $1 million in unrealized gains, which now have still carried forward through to the next quarter, but now you know that interest rates are lower now. So at year end, you mark to market and you're not exactly sure where you're going to end. And here in December, it was, the markets were in good shape. The charges for services that Michelle just spoke about, that's where all of our programming fees come in. And as you know, during shelter in place from March through December, we were very much shut down. And so we did not charge any user fees for day use. We did not have our facilities open. We did not have program fees. The concessionaires were very limited if they were able to operate at all. And so our, I think during mid-year or in September, we made a reduction to our budget by $7.2 million. And we still came in less than that by over 400,000. So that was a very big hit to the district's revenue. And to offset that, we did reduce our expenditures, mainly in areas that we knew were related to shelter in place, like not hiring our summer recreation staff and things like that. So that's where we did come in better than, overall, we came in better than expected, especially with those budget adjustments on the revenue side. On the expenditure side, again, it was a very abnormal year because we did not have our summer programming. So when you look through and you see where we came in less than budget, the areas that you think of are certainly the recreation staff. We didn't hire our full lifeguard staffs. The one we brought in were on special assignment because we had no aquatics during the summer. Things like the bus transportation for our summer camps, we didn't have to pay for that. That's a pretty high cost. Also, events, travel, and training costs were very low. Things like fuel, the district wasn't driving around as much. And then the maintenance on the vehicles, the maintenance on our aquatic facilities. I mean, there are several little categories that we did not spend our normal allocations because of the shelter in place. Also, we didn't hire any interns, and we canceled the RIN, which is our publication, because we just didn't have any programming to share for at least a quarter. So when you add all of that up, we had significant savings, which was very abnormal. And we had staff turnover, and it took a while for us to hire people. So we also had staff vacancies. And so those are some of the areas where we didn't spend our full expenditures, which really helped for the district to end the year positively. So I think I hit most of the questions that the Finance Committee members asked, but did anybody else have any questions on how we ended 2020? Great. Okay, Michelle, why don't you go ahead and go to your next slide.
Okay, the next couple of slides look at our pension and retiree medical or OPEB plans. The district's pension and OPEB liabilities, including CalPERS and the district plan, amounted to $137.8 million at the end of the year, which was an increase in about $900,000 over the prior year. To help mitigate the district's growing retiree obligations, the district established an irrevocable Section 115 pension trust in 2017 and has set aside a total of $9.3 million for funding anticipated increased costs of the CalPERS miscellaneous plan. When we look at pension funding progress, the district is funded at a range of 72% for the CalPERS miscellaneous plan to approximately 100% for the district's general employees retirement plan. While overall these are considered well-funded and in comparison to other agencies, these rates will fluctuate based not only on the contributions, but changes in investment returns and pension assumptions. Staff is requesting recommendation from the committee to bring the comprehensive annual financial report to the Board of Directors for acceptance at their July 6th meeting. That concludes my presentation. Are there any other questions?
Thank you, Michelle and Deborah. Before I go to questions from the rest of the group, Linda Best, do you have anything you'd like to say on behalf of the Finance Committee to the rest of the PAC?
I would just say that I think this report is very excellent and shows that the district is in very solid financial position. And the committee does recommend that the committee recommend the report to the Board of Directors. And would you like me to make that motion now and then we can open up to questions?
Yes, please.
Then I would move that we recommend to the Board of Directors the comprehensive annual financial report.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, that was moved by Linda and seconded by Carlin. Discussion, Rochelle, I see your hand.
Michelle, do you want to drop the screen? Thank you.
Okay, good. So to understand, and I'm gonna tell you, you know, as a member of a city council working on our CAFR and everything, it's a huge investment of time to kind of understand the budget and the results because of the complexity of fund accounting and so forth. So, but to sum it up, as best I can understand from looking at the summary, the district had very high a large budget to actual surplus. But then I see that it was largely offset by transfers out. And I don't know, I'd like to get a better understanding of that. Am I right that there was a big surplus? And can you describe what happened to offset it?
Thank you, Member Nason. Well, the district, first I want to say this annual financial report is a snapshot in time, and it's based on accounting rules of what we record as liabilities and assets. And as Michelle covered, the majority of our assets are actually land, right? Over $570 million in land and trails. Those are the majority of our assets. And the liabilities that are recorded, we just covered one of the groupings, right? Retirement liabilities. And those are very big numbers. But what the report doesn't capture is all the other long-term needs of the district that aren't qualified to be recorded as liabilities. So when you look at this report, it does give a snapshot in time of the district in accordance with generally accepted accounting rules, but it doesn't give the full breadth of what's going on in the district. And one instance of that is at the Finance Subcommittee, we talked about our fuels management program and what are we doing for the tree mortality issue and is there enough money for that? And that whole program is not really reflected as a liability in here, although all of us know that there is a huge need for funding and work to be done. And so you can see that kind of thing in our budget a little bit. Just to respond to that question, we did, in this year, we put aside $1.1 million in general funds, which is in addition to the grants that we have. And later, after we're all done with this presentation, I'll let Eric share the good news about the state budget, which will provide additional funding for that program. So that's one thing I want to say. The end of the year for the general fund was better than expected. And I tried to go over in that other slide the reasons for that. As I spoke about the property taxes, the interest revenue, and the expenditures that we did not spend because of the shelter in place. So that that put the district in a position where we had not spent all of our budgeted expenditures. And it did give us an additional fund balance into our reserves, right? And I also just want to take the chance to mention the three big prongs of financial stability and what we really strive for, which is very important for our bond rating and just for how, you know, even when the state is thinking of giving money to an agency, like they want to give it to an agency that can manage that money. And our clean audit report, our reserve balances, and our financial policies and procedures, those are the three big things that are looked at by bond rating agencies and grantors. And so we're really proud that we get clean opinions in our internal controls and in our financial reporting. So, so let me make sure I got all of your questions. I think I tried to talk about the reserves a little bit and the reasons why. And you want to repeat your last part of the question for me?
Sure. So am I correct in understanding, if someone were to ask me, you know, how did the district do and for the year that ended June 30th, 2020? And I were to say, it did great. It had like it did better by $20 million than its final budget. Its revenue over expenditure was like $20 million more, and but then there were transfers out, so that money is not actually available. If somebody says, "Oh, good, we can spend money to do this or to do that," and the answer is no, no, no. There were transfers out. Where did those transfers out go? That was about
Thank you for repeating that part of the question.
$4 million.
Yes.
Well, before you go to that part, am I right about the 26 million roughly that of revenue opposed to 6 million?
When we reported to the board about our fourth quarter results, we did say that we have 19 million greater than what our reserve requirement was. So
no, I'm not asking about the reserve requirement. I'm asking about for the year that ended June 30th, what was the surplus of revenue over expenditures, what was budgeted and what was realized? It looked to me, if I'm recalling it correctly, 6 million was budgeted, about 26 million was realized. Correct?
So you're right. If we were to bring back that slide, we did say that there was $25.8 million of net revenues over expenditures in the general fund. That's in the general fund only. That's correct. And then for the transfers, the way we do governmental accounting is we have to put things in certain funds. And so an example of transferring money out of the general fund and moving it to another fund is, say, the debt service on our promissory notes. We take general property tax revenue and we're obligated to move 1.5 million over to our debt service fund to pay those promissory notes. Another kind of moving the money over are when we're paying internal service funds. Sometimes we move over to pay for our insurance program, which is not expended in the general fund, it's in an internal service fund. So there are certain things that we move for operating purposes over to that fund. Another example is funding our long-term maintenance, infrastructure, and renovation program that we've reported to this group on before, where we're setting money aside to keep our facilities in order and to provide for renovation and replacement for those facilities. So we transfer money out of the general fund to fund that program. And we have a target of a minimum of $5 million to move over to that program, even though our target is 9 million. So those are some examples. And then certainly for capital projects, we have a capital project, and you'll hear a little bit more about that later today. All of the different funding sources come together to build something. And we're typically using grants, we're using our bond funds, And many times we also have to match some general fund matching money over to really pay for a complete project like building the bridge or opening a staging area. And so from time to time, money is transferred from the general fund to the capital funds for those types of things. So those are some examples. I think Michelle and I can certainly get you the details of some of the big transfers and send that to you. I just don't have any off the top of my head right now.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, I'll just add to that, Deborah. Rochelle, if you're interested, if you have the full financial report, it's the details are on page 68 of the transfers. It actually shows exactly what makes up that 24 million that you're questioning. And again, I'd be happy to walk through that with you offline.
Okay, I'm not looking so much for the details as the big picture, sort of able to say in a nutshell, here's what happened. And to be honest, I'm still a little confused. I mean, and maybe it's just me and everybody else gets it, but I guess I felt, could we bring back that slide for a second?
Sure.
Thank you.
And you know, the Park District is very large. So even when I came here from local government cities, the magnitude is very large. So when you're doing the percentage, it ends up being smaller, even though the dollar amounts are quite large.
Yeah, I definitely get that. So, so we had budgeted the final budget was actually a big deficit because of the required transfer. Is that right? If you go down to the below the bottom line, down to the other transfers. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we ended up with a small overrun. And those transfers, are those all mandatory or any of those discretionary?
Actually, this chart shows another process that the district does annually that we haven't talked about yet, and that's our mid-year review process. So the district has a practice of, you can see in the original budget, fund balance is a positive number there. And so when we appropriate our budget annually, we have a balanced budget. And then at mid-year, once we finish our audit, we go through a mid-year review process and we say, okay, how did we end the prior year? Let's utilize some of that savings and put it towards one-time appropriations, mainly to build up our reserves and address long-term needs and long-term liabilities. So in the second column there, under final budget, you can see that transfer number increased, right? This is where you're very keen at noticing that. And that's a big part of our mid-year review where we say, all right, we did end the year better than expected. And we do feel that this is not recurring funds. So let's put them aside for very important things. Like this year, we're recommending additional funding for the tree die-off. We are recommending putting money aside for working on aquatic facility needs and also purchasing more equipment for weed abatement and our weed abatement requirements. So there's an opportunity that we take every year. It's part of our annual cycle. And the majority of those expenditures do hit in that transfers out column where we're putting money in a separate project or funding source for those specific items to be addressed.
Okay.
Does that help?
It helps. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask you one other thing? You included material about FF and CC. Is that, are you going to be talking about that or is that just for our information?
So Measure CC and Measure FF are the next agenda item.
Okay.
Fund types are included in the annual report. We're just not reporting out on those specifics, but if you wanted to find out how those funds did, I think they're combined in the kind of the middle to the end part of the book. They're under non-major governmental funds. We do
That's okay. We can
on those.
if and that's the next agenda.
And our next agenda item, we'll get into details.
Okay, yeah, now I'm looking at that. You are also doing the grants and the CCNFF separately. So I'll ask about CCNFF.
Thank you for your questions.
Adela, you have questions?
Well, actually, I just think these might be helpful also for other people. There are several things that, and Deborah mentioned already retirement benefits, but there are several things called unfunded liabilities. And I think it'd be good for the full group to know like what's being done, what policies do we have in place to set aside money for those things? And that would be retirement. Also, what about pollution remediation? What about climate change? And that may be that's in the capital programs area. And also like maintenance for the increased number of properties.
Thank you for that question. Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to say at the beginning, that the district has a lot of liabilities and needs that aren't part of this. And the governmental rules, the governmental accounting rules did finally say, right, several years ago, you're going to put all your pension liabilities in this report. But before that, the pension liabilities were also out there without being reported. So that's why it's a big deal for us to show you the $137 million in liabilities there that are reported. And regarding pensions, the district has really been doing a very good job at putting money aside for these liabilities. You know, a long time ago, we did start kind of pre-funding our pensions over 10 years ago by just adding money to our pension expenditures that was in addition to the minimum requirements. And then I think it was in 2017, we started our pension trust. So to fund the miscellaneous pension liabilities. And I think, what does it say on the report? We're up to $9 million set aside in that pension trust that can help us with the volatility of rates and to pay down some of those liabilities. Also, we just had a report to the Finance Committee. And remember, I mentioned that the investment market was high at December. Well, it also helped with our pension assets because we have those funds invested in investments that also did really well. So when we looked at our funded status and the value of our pension assets, they were in very good shape this last year. And you keep your fingers crossed that the market's not going to crash, but right now they've definitely improved. So that's one area. Of course, the other liabilities that are recorded in the financial report are our bond funds. And so those are in there, but they're funded by additional property tax from the voters. So that's good. And then environmental remediation, we do have notes in our financial statements for our, it's pollution remediation, environmental remediation, which you know of as the closure of the Chabot Gun Club. We have work that we're doing in conjunction with the state, but right now we're kind of fronting all the money at Point Isabel to make sure that that area is secure. And then also we got a donation for the Burrell Agricultural Farm out at Las Trampas area. And we've done some soils work there and found that there was an underground storage tank that needs a lot of work. So those are absolutely some of the things that we're addressing in our mid-year for this year to put money aside for those kinds of costs, right? For the Chabot Gun Club, we just got a new report and the estimated total liability is $10 to $15 million. So, we do want to be able to clean that site up and have it available to the public in the future. So we don't feel like we're going to get grants for things like that. So we're using general fund money. And then Adele, I think you mentioned other things like just maintaining parks. And that's where we are, you know, making sure that at least our facilities and our trails, you know, including paved trails and roads, that we have funding for that by putting it in our infrastructure fund. And managing our parks with the equipment, as I mentioned. I'm sure there's other things. If you had any thoughts about, are we setting money aside for something else, let me know.
You know, that's helpful. I just, you know, wanted folks to know that the Park District has been doing a very good at being proactive on a lot of these items.
Yeah, and stewardship also, we have in the last 5 years really been focusing on stewardship and our grazing program. We've identified lots of work that needs to be done in our grazing program, which includes better fencing and better water. So we have funding in there for additional water meters so that the cattle that are grazing our lands can have access to water during years of drought. You know, also just our, you know, our turf areas, addressing drought, like you mentioned, climate change. We are looking at putting money aside for things like that because we know, you know, besides the tree die-off, the drought, sea level rise, our planning department is doing a lot of work analyzing our Bay Trail. I think you had a presentation on the vulnerability risk assessment recently, but a lot, yeah.
Great, thank you. Irene, you have a question?
Hi, thank you. I don't have any specific questions regarding the budget itself, about the light items or anything like that. But it's hard for me to wrap my head around what it is that we as an advisory committee is expected to give feedback on. I mean, the question here is for us to recommend acceptance of this to the board. And I feel a little in over my head to actually recommend something like that. So if you could just, you know, I feel like I don't know what advice I'm giving the board. So if you could just clarify, that would be great.
Well, let's see. Eric's been doing this a long time. I'll say you are a outside advisory committee. And so you as members of the larger public are, you know, kind of providing some oversight that maybe is a different view than the internal view. So I'm presenting you with the work that I know that we've done and the results that the auditors brought forward. But as an oversight committee, you have a different perspective. And so some of these questions are perfect to be asked to say, what about this? And I think that's the role that you play in reviewing this report, is just an outside perspective of asking those questions. If you've ever read some of the audit letters or documents, it is filled with disclaimers of we do this much out of all of this. So having this committee as an additional advisory committee to ask different types of questions that are maybe a little broader than even the focus of the financial audit is the perspective that I would see myself in as if I was a committee member.
Helpful. Linda, do you have any thoughts on that, or?
Yes, I was just going to say, I think it's what we're being asked to do here is based upon the report that we've heard today and the materials we've been able to review, and especially importantly, the questions that we're asking. Are we feeling confident that the district has done a good job of reporting all of the financial issues? And are we comfortable that it's in good condition and that the report is accurate? Well, we can't testify it's totally accurate because we don't have all the details. But based upon the report we're receiving, do we feel comfortable that the district has done a good job in reporting all the details and the outcomes and what it looks like for the return at the end of the year?
Yeah, I think that's true. Dev.
having reviewed more financial statements than I ever want to ever again and prepared hundreds of them in my lifetime. It's pretty good. I'd say these numbers look pretty good.
Okay.
I don't have
All
any
right.
questions. I can recommend.
Yeah, Rochelle?
Yeah, I think I'm probably just going to abstain for some of the reasons that Irene mentioned. As a council person at a small city, I spend days and end up, we chew up on the council, we chew up a certain amount of staff time having people, explain things and everything. And I think it would be terrible for the PAC to get into that level of comprehension. Would be too much work for the staff. But on the other hand, if you want us to sign off on it, then we probably would have to. So I'm comfortable with this as a presentation. I see nothing wrong with it. But on the other hand, if down the road someone were to find problems, and I wouldn't want to be in the position of having said, yeah, this all looks good, without having had the time and the staff support to really comprehend it. I will make this as just an overall general comment for everyone involved. And that is, when I spent time as an executive, running budgets and so forth, and I never got in trouble for for spending too much, because I always went to my board and said, we need more, we're going to have to spend more on such and such, and would always get it pre-authorized. The only time I ever got in trouble was when we didn't spend money. And someone said, we gave you money to do that and you didn't do it. What happened there? And so my only concern about looking at these numbers is this enormous surplus that was not budgeted. And I'm sure, if I get down and look at where the transfers out went, that they're all good and they were all approved and it's all exactly as it should be. But there is we are a policy recommendation group. I don't know that we ever recommended what should happen with that surplus. And I think that's really where we could be of some use, is when there is a surplus, the PAC, we're supposed to be another layer of public input about policy decisions. I think that's where we could do something a lot more helpful to the agency than opining on whether the financial statements are properly prepared. So that's just a general comment about the PAC's role in all this. Thank you.
And Rick, if I might just add one more comment. Certainly the finances of the district are pretty complicated, as we can see from the length of the report. But I think if we look at sort of, if you want to call it the bottom line, what it's showing us is that the district is in good financial shape, and the district has done a good job of planning throughout the year to adjust for the things that are happening that will affect both revenue and expenses. Thank you.
Okay. Irene, you have a question. I'd like to move on as we can, because we have a lot more on the agenda, but Irene and then Roland.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Rochelle said, that I think I'm going to abstain also, just because I don't feel comfortable recommending acceptance of a report that is, a little bit more complex than I'm comfortable with.
Okay.
So I just wanted to add that.
That's fine. Roland?
I think the question that was posed a little while ago was, what are we doing with the recommendation? For me personally, and I'm in the same place where Dev is, where I've seen a lot of these documents, but notwithstanding that, I do think it was fairly stated that, we are a body of disparate public people who have an interest in the district. And I find this process to be an exercise in transparency. And so to that end, I feel comfortable with it. And there was a third party auditor. It does meet the GASB requirements. And for that, I would be comfortable voting for it. But then as Dev, I do see financial documents a lot. And so I certainly understand folks' trepidation. But again, I think for me, it's that we're not supposed to be financial experts per se in reviewing this, but this is an opportunity for the district to articulate their financial positions and is this fairly accurate? To that point, I think one of the things that could also come out of this is how could this be kind of compressed into some document that's more digestible, not just for the PAC, but for the community that's served. And from that perspective, and that would be something I would offer to friendly amend the offering, is that how well is this being articulated to the community, and can they just, and that might be infographics or something that can really just simply tell the district story.
Thank you. Carlin?
Thank you. You know, I think that Roland's comments are very well stated. And I do agree that, you know, this has been reviewed at the Finance Committee and it's being reviewed here and it'll go to the board as well. And so I think that this does give the opportunity for the public to hear the presentation multiple times and find out what is going on. But yeah, I think it would be helpful to figure out, you know, how, because I always have to look at these things like at my city council meetings too. And sometimes it's just a consent calendar item. So I'm glad that we're digging into this. But if there is a way to like create like a summary sheet or something so that people can kind of see, hey, the Park District is being fiscally responsible when it comes to pensions. Actually, you know, the finances are in good shape in spite of COVID. They're thinking ahead with things related. I know at the Finance Committee, we had the questions related to addressing fire danger. So, you know, some high level bullet points that I think the public would be interested in. And so, but again, I'm glad that we had this robust discussion because finances are very important. And sometimes these kind of documents just kind of slip by and there's a lot of very important information therein. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlin. Okay, we do have a motion on the floor. The motion is to recommend the comprehensive annual financial report to the board. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll?
Yes, thank you, Chair Rickard. Vice Chair Obringer?
Sorry about that. Yes.
Thank you. Member Best?
Yes.
Yes. Member Carey?
Yes.
Member Chang?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Claxton?
Yes.
Member Corkin?
Yes.
Thank you. Member DeChambeau?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Dieter?
Abstain.
Okay. Member Gregory?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Ho?
Yes.
Member Mahadevan?
Yes.
Member Nason?
Abstain.
Member Robinson?
Yes.
Member San Juan?
Yes.
Member Skardoff?
Yes.
Member Williams?
Yes.
And Chair Rickard?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Remember, the item passes. The next item on our agenda is a grants update, an informational item presented by Katie Hornbeck.
I'm Katie Hornbeck, Grants Manager. I will go ahead and get PowerPoint pulled up. One moment. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Looks great, Katie.
Great, all right. Well, as I said before, Katie Hornbeck, Grants Manager. I believe when I presented to you last year, I was acting. So I'm here again in a permanent capacity, started in this position at the beginning of this year. So excited to be back, having learned a little bit more about grants. So I'll be giving a general grants program update. And then I just wanted to point out that the photos that you see in the background are all projects that were recently completed or in progress that were funded by different grants. So today's presentation, these are the topics that I'll be covering, starting with the legislation to implementation process when it comes to grants, a general grants department overview, basically sort of what is in our workflow or workload, Prop 68 implementation, 2017 winter storms, fuels management, Measure AA, transportation grants, and then ending with an update on our Measure WW local grant program. So what I wanted to do first was give a overview on sort of how we start and end the process when it comes to grants. So at the beginning, it's really sits with the general manager and the board and our government affair and legislative team, where they are out there in the community and talking with elected officials and politicians and building programs and proposing programs where we can tap into and be eligible for funding. So they're sort of creating lots of money for us. Once the program is created, it then, or the pot of money is created, it gets divvied out among the administrating agencies like the Wildlife Conservation Board or the Coastal Conservancy, California Natural Resources Agency. So it goes out to all of them, and then they decide and start making the guidelines and the rules for how they're going to distribute that money. And once they do that, then they'll put out an announcement and the application. And that's really where I step in, and my staff is we'll then put in the application for a particular project that we know is ready for funding, and that we know we can spend that funding within the 3 to 4 years or whatever the timeline is. And then if we are lucky enough to be awarded the grant, it turns into our project implementation. And we like to say that we get paid for the grants or for the projects that we complete, not the grants that we receive. So we really show that we do a good job in completing our projects, which demonstrates, we create good relationships with these agencies. And so they know that we can spend the money the way we say we're going to spend the money in the time we're going to spend it, and then put out the product that we said. And so that's really key to the grant process, as well as relationships, not only at the very end as we apply for money, but also at the very beginning too, in working with trying to create programs and pots of money to spend in our parks. So here's a brief grants department overview. As in last year, we monitored and managed approximately 182 separate project contracts, totaling 152 million. And then last year, we also invoiced and we received approximately 7.3 million in grant payments. And that was for over 74 different grant project transactions. And when I say we, the grant staff, that's myself, and we have an account technician and an admin analyst too, that handle all of the invoicing and processing for these projects. These two pie charts show, I'll start with the one on the left, the open current grants. So of the 150 to 180 grants that we're tracking at any time, they fall into one of 5 categories. The largest one you can see is considered active. That's the 78. So those are grants that we have secured. The funds have been appropriated in the budget. The project is typically underway, and we're spending that money. Then we have pending, which means that we know that this is a grant program that's going to most likely be announced later this year or next year, and it's something we want to apply for because we know we have a project in the queue. Then we have applied, which means like it sounds, we've submitted an application and we're waiting to hear back of whether or not we'll be selected for an award. And then that's where we see our green category, awarded. Well, from the notification of, hey, we like your project, we like your application, we want to fund it, to actually securing the grant funds and appropriating it in the budget can take anywhere from a few months to over a year. And it generates lots of different paperwork and different timelines and requests that we have to fulfill on our end to the grant agency. And then finally, we have closeout, which means the project is done and now we're putting a bow on everything, submitting final invoices, final reports, making sure the agency has all of the deliverables that we said we would give them, as well as final site visits. And then on the right, you can see the number of grants by department, the majority of which are in design and construction, followed by this orange one. Administration is actually mostly the FEMA 2017 storm projects. All right, moving on to Prop 68 implementation. So far, over the last few years, the Park District has either applied for and or awarded at least 6 Prop 68 grants. And these are highlighting the ones that were awarded last year, starting with the Point Mulati Bridge to Beach San Francisco Bay Trail extension. That was a $1.2 million grant. So we were received award notification at the end of last year, and we're still getting that agreement in place to finalize it. Then we have Doolittle Bay Trail and Park Improvements Project. That was a $1.4 million grant. And then just a couple of months ago, we applied for funding for the Tidewater project, and that was for $2.9 million. 2 other programs that are funded by Prop 68 were per capita. So this one we were awarded about $4.5 million, and we get to decide which projects we want to fund with that money. And so we proposed and the board approved divvying that money up between the Tidewater project, Tyler staging area, Roberts Pool, renovation, and replacing a restroom building at Brioni's. And then finally, the recreational infrastructure revenue enhancement, or shorthand is RIRE. We were awarded $1.5 million. This was because we had we passed the Measure FF ballot. And so again, this is one where we get to select which project we want to fund. It has to be within the Measure FF area, and we selected Roberts Pool. There are at least 2 programs coming up this year that we know are going to be announced that we'll be able to apply for. One of them being for, it's called the Regional Parks Program. So we plan on applying for that later this year. 2017 storms. So there was approximately 9.5 million in damage. There were 58 identified projects over 29 parks, and so far about 39 have been completed. And the anticipated timeline for completion of the rest of the projects will be between now and through the end of 2023. Moving on to fuels and management, or excuse me, fuels vegetation management grants. So this is an overview of all of our fuels grants at the top, noting what's considered active, meaning those are funds that we've secured and appropriated in our budget. We have 2 from FEMA and 1 from CAL FIRE and another one from the Coastal Conservancy. So this is totaling a little over $8 million. We were recently awarded earlier this year 2 more grants, one from FEMA, one from the Coastal Conservancy. This Coastal Conservancy grant, the funding became available, and the requirement was that work had to start later this year. So this is a grant where the turnaround was very, very tight, and when we had to submit the application and then agree to be able to start the work later this summer. And so this has just recently been secured within the last week or so. Oh, I apologize. There we go. And then we have 3 pending applications with CAL FIRE, 2 of which are in the fire prevention program. One is for vegetation mapping, and then the other one is for goat grazing throughout the Park District. And then the forest health grant, that $5 million one, was specifically targeting the tree dieback areas in the Park District to start working on taking care of that work. And it'll probably be at least a few months before we hear back on whether or not we'll get funding from either one of those programs. Measure AA implementation. So over the last few years, the Park District has submitted 10 applications to the Restoration Authority, and we've been awarded in each round. This highlights the 4 awards. The first one was for a construction project out at Encinal Dunes, which was completed at the end of last year. And this was actually the first construction project that the Restoration Authority had funded that was completed. So they were really excited to see this project come to fruition, and it turned out really great. If you haven't been out there yet, it's super beautiful out there, and just a great example of what grant funding can do. And then the Coyote Hills grant, we've received 2 grants for that project. This first one, the smaller one, was for the design and planning phase. And then this most recent award, just within the last few weeks, for 3.5 million, is for the construction phase of the project, which I believe is tentatively scheduled to begin next year. And the Hayward Marsh Improvement Grant was for planning and design. So it can be for either one. And the Restoration Authority often likes to fund both components of the project if they can. And the main requirement is that the project has to have a habitat restoration component to it in order for it to be eligible. Transportation and trails grants. So we continue to be successful in obtaining these kinds of grants. These are just a few highlights. These are the projects, and the amount next to it is showing the total amount of grant funding within that project. So for Lone Tree Point Bay Trail, that's a project that's almost completed. I believe it's supposed to be open later this summer. And within that, we got a $2.1 million trails grant from the California Natural Resources Agency. The Point Mulati Bridge to Beach project, which is construction is scheduled to begin next year. We secured 3.1 million from also the California Natural Resources Agency and a priority conservation area grant as well. The Doolittle Bay Trail, earlier this year, we secured a $4 million grant from the Active Transportation Program. And then this last one, trail maintenance, which is mostly happening in Contra Costa County, is through the Measure J program. We get to apply every year for usually between $250,000 and $500,000 in a different area of Contra Costa County to do trail maintenance. And then finally, the Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. This is the RAISE grant program through the Department of Transportation. It's been called BUILD, and it's also been called TIGER. We are very close to the application deadline coming up in just a few weeks. It's been an incredible internal team group effort to get this application package ready. We have 8 projects that we're applying for. In total, the packages requesting $24.6 million. The limit for each state to be awarded is 50 million. So we don't anticipate being awarded the full 24.6. If we're awarded, partial, a few million or 10 million or whatever it ends up being, then we can decide which of those 8 projects we'll be able to fund. And then finally, the Measure WW local grant program. So this program will be expiring in 2024. We recently were approved an extension by the board. So this covers 2 counties and at least 46 cities and communities, local park districts, and county service areas benefit from this program. And the projects that this funds includes the creation and expansion and improvement of neighborhood parks and playgrounds, community centers and pools, tennis courts, and neighborhood trails, just to name a few. And we did the extension because there were a few projects that still needed to be finished and we're going to meet the end of year deadline. So we wanted to give them enough time to complete the projects. And then at the end of March each year, or when new applications need to be submitted, and we only received one, which was approved by the board earlier this year at a board meeting. All right, that is it. I am happy to answer any questions. That was a lot of information very, very quickly. So I'll go ahead and take down my screen.
Are there questions for Katie? No. Wow. Gee, a very thorough report, I guess.
Stunned you. Great.
Oh, wait, Adela, you're,
Yeah, I'll just say, I just want to compliment you on all this work. I know how much work it is to put a grant application together and then to like meet all the requirements and submit all the completion stuff. And this is awesome. Good job.
Thank you. Yes, and that reminds me, we have a lot of isms and grants, and we say, grants are risky, and so we do a lot of work to apply, and then we cross our fingers and hope we get it. And yeah, so it's exciting when we do, and can complete the project. So yeah, thank you.
great. All right, thank you again, Katie. That's great. Oh, Carlin.
Yeah, I apologize if I missed it, but what is the track record in terms of like what percent of the time do you usually receive the grants for which you apply, and how competitive, do you find this process to be?
To answer the competitive question, it really depends on the program. This, the RAISE program, the one that we're just about to submit for, is incredibly competitive. And so we're going into it, a little tentative, not really sure how it's going to go, just because we know there's going to be hundreds of applications for a relative, in the grand scheme of things, a small pot of money. There are other times we know that like an agency has reached out to us and said, hey, this funding is available. Do you have a project that we could fund? And that's a little bit more sure. So it really kind of depends on what the program is. And then I think your other question was the percentage of, was it like the number of applications we submit that get awarded? Was that your question?
Yeah. Like, I mean, is it like 60% of the time you're successful, or do you have a sense of that?
I wouldn't be able to say definitively. And part of the issue is that sometimes we, we'll submit, last year, I think we submitted 25 applications, and the year before was maybe 30. This year we're on track to submit 40. And sometimes we don't find out for a year or two. So it's, right now I couldn't tell you. I could probably dig in and give you a rough number, but the other issue is sometimes we initially won't get awarded, but later additional funding will come up and they'll say, oh, hey, are you still interested? Do you still have that project? So we kind of toggle back and forth between awarded, not awarded with certain applications.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Katie. Jeff Rasmussen, are you still with us? Ready to talk about measures CCWW and FF?
I am, Rick. Thank you for the introduction. So I guess with that, I will try to share my screen and we'll get started. Does that look okay?
Yep, looks great.
Yes.
Nice.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeff Rasmussen, Assistant Finance Officer, as Rick introduced. Thank you. So here I'm today to give you a funding overview of our Measure CC, our Measure FF, and our Measure WW programs. Just for a little context, and this is from our capital program. You can see the history of the Park District of funding from our WW program, our AA program, our AA bonds, district funding, and grants. Almost $1 billion of funding since 1988. Measure CC and FF that I will be reporting are a part of the district funds within the capital program here. And then I won't be reporting on the Measure AA program tonight because that program is largely completed. We have about $12 million left in it, but it's that program is largely over. So when talking about Measure CC and FF, they both refer to this same area in the western part of the Park District. And the map here that you see is the same map for both CC and FF. FF was an extension of CC. So when I'm talking about those programs, this is the map that applies. So for Measure CC, most of you know, began in 2004. It was a 15-year program, and it completely sunsetted or ended in 2020. So the program is essentially completely over. The most important thing to note here at the very bottom of the slide is that we received $47.8 million of revenue, which I'll show in a moment was actually $1 million more than we had originally planned. So look at the Measure CC program in total. The original budget or estimate was about $46 million, $46.7 million over the life of the program. And that's what this was based on. But you can see at the bottom there, we actually received an additional $1 million of revenue. And I guess I'm trying to skip around a bit. To date, we are about 90% complete with the program. And we have about 4.8 million or 10% left to spend to finish out the program. Program includes 83 total projects, 57 are complete and 15 are in progress. And then 11 of those projects are continuous or ongoing. And they really fall into two categories. One is staffing costs, which all of the staffing that remained in Measure CC has been moved to FF. So I'll cover that more in detail about the staffing part when I cover Measure FF. And then also fuels management is considered an operational project within this program. So fuels management is very important to the district and has some money to finish in CC and obviously continues on in FF. So it's just a couple of completed projects to share. I'm sure people in the committee have seen all the great work at Albany Beach and the public, the restoration, public access going on out there. And then just another brief, we're getting really into the program, a landslide that was repaired at Claremont Canyon to be able to get into there. So for our 15 remaining projects that are in progress, this year, mid-year, we propose to appropriate $727,000. That's really the final remaining parts of that program. I'll show you a couple of examples in a minute. And we also have about $116,000 in adjustments, projects that came either over or under budget, but totaled out and needed $116,000 to balance for these in-progress projects. So some examples of the in-progress projects are here, Tidewater public access improvements at MLK Shoreline, and it's finishing up. It's in progress for Measure CC, and fortunately, it's also part of Measure FF. There's a theme you'll see throughout this as I describe the projects in both programs. Another project, in-progress project, is San Francisco Bay Trail improvements out at Miller Knox. That's one of our important commitments for CC still to be completed. Then as our operational projects, as I mentioned, all the staffing has been moved to FF, but we still have about $1.4 million available for fuels management. So the fire department and operations will continue to work on that, but closing out the fuels management expenditures within CC. And then, as I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, we have about $1 million in extra funds. And after using some of those funds and closing out underages and overages of some of those projects, we anticipate about $700,000 of new money being available in the Measure CC program over what we originally was in the original budget. And staff is recommending to the board that that money be appropriated to fuels management within the CC zone. And then with that, I'll move on to Measure FF. It was approved by the voters and starts in 2020. And this program goes for 20 years rather than 15 years. And it's budgeted or expected to provide $3.3 million per year. Certainly at the end of 20 years, that may change as it did in Measure CC. But right now it's anticipated to provide about $3.3 million per year for these priority goals or objectives listed here below, these six objectives. So a big part of Measure FF, especially early on, when we don't have a lot of money saved up for large projects, is staffing. So here's a rather detailed report of where all the staffing for Measure FF is allocated and goes. I think the most important thing here to realize, besides the total of 11.59 FTEs in FF, is that every year there's cost of living adjustments. So the cost for 2022 are anticipated to be $1.79 million, but throughout the life of the program, those costs will certainly increase. And then just here's another look at another analysis of the staffing and where it resides, not by park, but then by department. And then for 2022, as we move into the program, here are some of the project priorities and moving forward. Green transportation, I'll show some slides in a few minutes about some of those great green transportation projects in FF. Also transit partnerships, there's money to help improve our Parks Express and transportation options for for to get to our parks. Safe and healthy forests as always. Martin Luther King Jr., I'll talk about some improvements for that. A big priority for Measure FF was water quality. So all the improvements and work needed at Lake Temescal and green algae is the focus for 2022, as well as Miller Knox improvements at Keller Beach. And then we will begin for the first time implementing our water bottle filling station part of the Measure FF program. So here's a few examples of that for that, some highlights. So the SF Bay Trail extension for Point Melati, Katie Hornbeck mentioned that we have grants for this, but also Measure FF is an important funding component for that. This money was actually for Crown Beach on McKay Avenue. That's the picture here is McKay Avenue. The initial money for that actually was appropriated for the 2021 budget, but before we can really make any improvements at Crown Beach here, we have to resolve our infrastructure issues. They're aged and falling apart, but also too, they're coordinated and connected with the federal GSA property next door. So we need to separate, isolate those and improve them before we can build anything or think about building anything at Crown Beach. Do a little dry Bay Trail project. We have $8.3 million of grants, but it's also an important part of the Measure FF and Measure CC program. And then, as I mentioned before, Lake Temescal and water quality is always a priority for this program. And then our water bottle filling station, there's definitely a priority, it's part of the program and a priority for the board to make these stations more available district-wide. And fuels management, as always, this great shot across from the Brazil room, some good work that was done. And then moving on briefly to Measure WW, which is a bond program. Before I begin, I just want to give some context there that the Measure WW program and the way it's allocated is divided up across 3 metros across the Park District. We have the Western Metropolitan section there, we have the South Metro area and the Diablo sector. And the objective is to try to balance the appropriation or the spending of WW funds across those 3 metros. But an important thing to point out for Measure WW is that it does not include the Murray Township. Murray Township was not part of the district when we passed Measure AA, and then WW as an extension also does not include this area. So Measure WW began in 2008, and we have $229 million left to be spent or appropriated for the Measure WW program. So that's where we're at. As I mentioned before about trying to balance the expenditures across the metros, and it's still relatively early in the program. Just in the acquisition side, we're actually doing relatively well compared to our targets. That may change over time, but so far we're doing pretty well. On the development side, and the park development side, it's a little less. We've done a lot of work in West County, you know, with Bruner Marsh, Albany Beach Restoration, Big Break. I apologize. Bridge Yard. We've done a lot of work at Point Pinole. So right now we spend a little bit more in the west. We have a little more catch up to do in the south and the Diablos. But as I said, it's relatively still early in the program. So throughout the life of the program, we've actually sold bonds of approximately $80 million each time. So that's what's seen in the blue line here. You can see 3 distinct step ups each time we sold bonds in 2012, 14, and 17 when we sold bonds. And we anticipate we will need to sell bonds either this year or next to have funding to continue to work in WW program. You can actually see here on the far left, on the far right of the graph, where our red line, WW appropriations, we've actually appropriated we've appropriated more WW funds than we've sold bonds for. But that's actually not necessarily a concern because we don't ask for a repayment of the bonds until we've completed the work or expended them. So you can see the green line on the right is starting to approach the blue line. That's what we're monitoring closely. So as that green line begins to approach the blue line, that indicates when we really need to sell bonds. And this is just our year-over-year burn rate or expenditures in the WW program. Looking at this, 2020 was actually a relatively good year for us with all the challenges that we had with COVID. I was personally impressed that we did fairly well in 2020 for implementing the program. And looking at 2021, we've got a pretty good start so far. An important part of the WW program is our reserve fund. It began at $26 million, 7% of the program was in the reserve. We currently have a balance in the reserve of about $20 million. And some of the projects that are suggested by staff for that include Tyler and Garm staging area at Pleasant and Ridge, the GSA property that I mentioned before at Crown Beach, and staff will continue to return to the board to to make suggestions or recommendations on where to appropriate our reserve funds. Just for context, here's some of the projects that have already received reserve funds. And then finally, in our bond sales, our most recent bond sale in 2020, we actually sold $30 million of that was green bonds. And green bonds is a very new entity or category of bonds. They don't provide the district with necessarily any savings or savings on the interest rate and things like that. But it is a good opportunity for bond purchasers to invest their money in green projects and green infrastructure. And for the district, we use those funds to fund things like land acquisition for preservation, regional trails for green transportation, and a lot of our wetland and habitat restoration projects. So it's been a good and interesting program for us. And again, very, very new type of product in the market. And with that, I will take any questions.
Are there questions for Jeff? Oh, Adela.
I'm on a roll today. I actually have it's kind of a specific question on I'm really curious on the Measure WW Urban Creeks WW bond projects. It's in progress. I'm wondering, and if you know what particular projects are in progress there.
They're in progress because one, we did issue a round of competitive grants to the regional agencies, and the board awarded 3 grants for that. And I think one of the projects in San Pablo has actually been completed. I haven't visited myself, but I think they had a dedication event. So I think that project is largely in process or nearly complete. And then there are other projects in Lafayette and Moraga that are still underway. And then also some of those funds also went towards our McCosker Creek Restoration Project, which had its first year of construction, started last year and is in progress and will be completed this year.
Okay, thank you.
Rochelle.
Yeah, you know, we had in my town, we had a park measure on the same ballot with FF. And right now we're working on our report to show how that impacted, how the passage of that measure impacted the purposes for which it was passed. And I'm curious about that for CC and FF in particular. Well, I guess WW2. What kind of reports would you refer someone to if they're interested in seeing how, not just what was spent, you know, but how it impacted the spending? Presumably spending is higher in this part of the Park District's jurisdiction as a result of these special measures being passed. How do we verify and understand those impacts?
Go ahead, Deborah.
Thanks, Deborah Ocker, CFO. So I'll use the Measure AA bond issue as an example. And about halfway through that program, we did what we kind of called a report card, where we said out of all of the language in the initiatives, right, we break it down into all these separate allocation areas. Did we make progress on the acquisition part, you know, and we put a check mark. Did we make progress or complete the development commitments that we made? And so for Measure AA, we did that. And I think the board recently, when we presented this same presentation to them at their workshop, they asked us to get ready to prepare something like that for Measure WW. As Jeff said, we're still pretty early in the program, but we'll go ahead and start to put together that kind of report card. And then for Measure CC, we did a different type of reporting out where we did many publications really kind of showing all the different areas that were highlighted in Measure CC, including the environmental restoration part of it and the, just all the different categories. And I think on our website, there's quite a bit of information about all of the projects. And we didn't do the same kind of report card for Measure CC, although I don't know, in your packet, did you have all the completed projects? So we did try to show that, certain things are completed and certain things are still in progress. So that's what we've done here in the past for reporting out. I think also in your documentation, there is a listing. It's not fancy like Public Affairs would put forward. It's more of a finance document. And we tried to color code it. So if you look at it online, you can see the colors where we said, here's the language of what the initiative stated. And depending on what color we changed those words to, it would say whether it was in progress or completed or not started. And so that's kind of where we are in the reporting out of this, in addition to looking at the dollars.
Yeah, we're doing something different. We're trying to address sort of the concern about it being a shell game, that we move money around so that we're spending on our institutional priorities and maybe not spending more as a result of
the question of supplanting funds.
Yeah.
Comes up sometimes. Yeah. With the capital bonds, we don't have that issue as much. We just need to show like what's out there. Where is the land? Where are the projects?
Yeah. And I can tell you from my experience working in grants, having the seed money, having these projects started and all these programs, that really then let us leverage grants. So my anecdotal experience is that having these programs really just helps us do and complete even that much more in these areas.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Great. I see Eric just sent some links out on chat if you're interested in pursuing that a little further as well. Other questions for Jeff? If not, Deborah and Jeff, thank you very much for the update. Great. All right, that was an information item, so we can move on. Are there any committee members who would like to make a comment at this time? Tell us about the exciting things you've been doing. Rochelle.
It's not about anything exciting that I've been doing, but I'm curious about the status of the policy about feral cats and whether we'll be taking that up.
Who is the feral cat expert? Would that be you, Jim? Or Eric?
It's actually, I think it's actually Christina Kelchner. And I'm not sure where we are with that, but we can get back to you and let you know.
Okay, I sent an email about that. I think that's the kind of thing where this body could actually be of some utility to the agency and, helping bridge the gap that seemed to open up between the public and the district. It's important we be sure that people realize that they're being heard and that legitimate concerns are being addressed. Thank you.
Michael.
Yeah, just some congratulations. If you haven't seen the current activity guide that just came out, I'd like to say it's one of the best I've ever seen, coming off the pandemic in particular, with the amount of detail and updates and transparency, since that's the word of the day. Take a look at it, share it, make sure folks get out and enjoy these parks. That's it.
Great, thank you. Irene, I see you nodding in agreement with that.
Yes, we're all ready to get out. And I just have a suggestion for a future agenda item that the staff may consider, is that we have a little refresher course about the purpose of the PAC, maybe how it came to be and what our role is. Well, I think that would be really helpful.
Well, interestingly, the executive committee has been working for like the last year on reviewing our mission statement and guidelines. We came up with a proposal, And it's actually on our agenda for our next meeting to present that to you, which will then go to the executive committee and the board if you agree with it. So it's been something like 13 years since we did that. So it's probably time for a review, but it is on the agenda.
Good.
Yeah. Dev, you have a comment.
Yes, a question really about, since we talked about getting out, yes, I agree with what Mike said, Michael Gregory, about the new catalog is really very nice and encouraging, get out, but when are we going to have a meeting in person? Like to see 3 dimensions of people again.
Well, actually, Eric and I have been dialoguing about that. We can't schedule in-person meetings yet since the board is not even coming back into the Peralta Oaks yet. But I know Deborah has been working on trying to come up with the infrastructure to allow us to do simultaneous in-person and remote meetings. And so that's something that we're looking at more toward the end of this year. We are talking about trying to get together for the barbecue that we're missing in July, maybe in September, either as the September meeting or maybe separately, because we've always done a summer field trip, doing a field trip in like on a weekend in September that would include a barbecue and get together and visit a location and get to see one another in person as well. So we're looking at several alternatives, but we are trying to find ways to get you personally connected with one another once again. Eric, do you want to say anything more about that?
Just that we'll be continuing to stay in touch and we'll try to nail something down. But I do think it would be hard to do a barbecue and a business meeting together, just given the technology and that probably a field trip is what makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Michael, your hand is up, but you're just left over from your previous, okay. Other comments? I don't have anything particular to report other than what I've talked about that's upcoming. Anyone who has attended board committee and wishes to make comments about board committee meetings? No. Any other old business or new business that anyone wishes to bring up? Gosh, we're going to make it on time.
Rick, I just wanted to mention one thing. I think Deborah alluded to it earlier, that in the budget that's being debated, state budget being debated tonight.
Oh, yes.
The Park District is on course to receive $13.5 million for basically vegetation management and the tree die-off issue that I think Eileen and I brought to this group a while ago. So knock on wood, the governor doesn't take it out, but right now that funding is in the state budget.
Great. Yes. Hallelujah. Any other input from members? If not, then the Park Advisory Committee meeting of June 28th, 2021 is now adjourned at 6 p.m. on the dot. The next meeting is scheduled for July 26th at 4 p.m. I will see you all then, and maybe in the fall in person.